let's talk about what I learned in my first year of fatherhood. This episode will be very useful to you if you're ever going to be a father. Either your girl's pregnant now or your child was recently born. I recently had a son myself, and the knowledge I'm sharing in this episode today will be most beneficial. I'm certainly not a specialist in child rearing, but over the past 2 years, I have studied a vast amount of information and interacted with the best specialists in our country. This information is present in many of my podcasts, but if you're too lazy to watch them all separately, today I have collected the 10 most important points in one episode, which will be maximally useful for you. Therefore, watch this video to the end and you will get a huge benefit, which will stay with you for your whole life. The most important thing is where I would like to start and why. It's very important never to get angry with your wives. Even if she behaves badly, never get angry with her, especially in the first trimester. Many believe it's impossible to harm the baby in this manner. Today, I'll explain to you why simple quarrels or stress at your spouse's work, especially in the first trimester, can lead to such diseases in your child. I mentioned bronchial asthma, allergies, autoimmune diseases, cardiovascular diseases, migraines, lipid metabolism disorders, diabetes, and obesity. But how does it work that stress can affect a child? Well, look, it's all very simple. First of all, the blood supply is shared, right? If stress hormones are released in the mother, for example, cortisol, there's nothing terrible about this in acute cases. But it's bad when it's chronic stress. Chronic stress leads to your child beginning to suffer. There is a protective system. The placenta indeed protects the baby. The placenta is a ball that the baby is in. The placenta really protects the baby from the effects of maternal hormones. And it does so 90% of the time. Only 10% of hormones reach the baby, but it works incrementally. The older the fetus, the better this protection works. The placenta does not form immediately. It functions normally from a hormonal protection standpoint in the second trimester, and excellently in the third. In the first 3 months of life, this fermentation system works poorly. There is a ferment 11B hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. 2-OGO hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase is called differently. That is, it is a ferment that transforms the cortisol, which is suitable for a child, into a cortisol that is safe for him. And this ferment, it stands out well in the second trimester and in the third, while in the first there is practically none of it. Therefore, it's very important. What can this lead to? For instance, we discussed this topic thoroughly in the podcast with the president of the Pediatric Association of Russia. There's a vivid example of how actual problems with the mother led to the fact that the child was born prone to obesity. In many post-war besieged cities, children who were born from mothers who were malnourished and under chronic stress, they became prone to obesity. And they passed this propensity on to the next generation. It persists for 2 generations. It's very important, if you don't want your child to have tendencies like towards obesity, to remove this. Why does it work like this? The point is that the set of genes we pass on to our child does not change, but their activity can change. And when the body gets a signal that, my friend, something bad is going, it expects a very bad life for you, so please adapt. And it begins to adapt because, for example, obesity is a factor in the body's adaptation. This is only in the context of obesity, but I have listed enough diseases for you. Another factor is when a woman is under stress, adrenaline is released, for example, cortisol, blood vessels in the body go into spasm. And they go into spasm, including, especially in chronic form, the blood vessels that feed our child, that is, the placental vessels. This leads to a deficiency of nutrients, and the body adjusts to life in conditions of nutritional deficiency. This also increases the risk that the child will get sick. So the first rule is under no circumstances to stress out your spouse. Ideally, she should not work at all. Many people think that the absence of stress is just not arguing with your spouse. The stress a woman especially feels during this period comes from a sense of vulnerability, from feelings of discomfort, from a lack of confidence in her partner. Therefore, it is very important that a woman at this moment feels loved, cherished, protected. What unexpected things have I even specially highlighted separately? This can lead to a woman experiencing stress. The most common, according to women, first is the fatigue from the unusual changes in the body due to pregnancy. That is, the pregnancy itself is a stress for her. The second is anxiety about the upcoming births and caring for the baby. Therefore, it's important for a woman to possibly take some courses on giving birth. so that all this will be good, so she doesn't stay in the feeling of this stress, fear of losing work and career development, family problems, financial instability, and lack of emotional support from a spouse. These are the main things that worry a spouse, and in the opinion of scientists, among other things, lead to fetal hypoxia. Secondly, the mother's nutrition is crucial. The trends that I see, and if your spouse is already going to behave like this, venture to restrain her. They, afraid to correct it, they begin to starve. They start to go on diets. They begin to limit themselves because the weight increases. Everyone is prone to fullness differently. Everyone gains weight during pregnancy differently. Specialists talk about the fact that it is normal to gain weight. Yes, there are, of course, extremes. But when a woman particularly sits on some diets, then somewhere on social networks she posts, "Look, I managed to lose weight even more." This is not good because a diet is not just a calorie deficit, it's a deficit of their nutrients. And she isn't the only one in deficit. Her child is in deficit too, if the child will be in a deficit of nutrients. Remember where we started, that he will be prone to certain diseases and conditions when he is born. And you will never fix this, because a child's predisposition, for instance, in utero, is genetically formed. And after the first 2 or 3 years of independent eating, these three factors, which you can no longer influence as you get older, are set. If you want a good life for your future child, never forget about these things. On the Vegetarianism podcast, strict vegetarians, vegans are being brought up. This is not very good. If you are still followers of such a diet style, then you must definitely compensate for your deficits. That's why it's critical before it becomes desirable. If pregnancy has occurred, it's understandable. However, if you are planning it, it would be desirable to check for any deficiencies, such as iron, in women. Correction sometimes takes 2 to 4 months. Even if you are young, even if you are not at risk, it is advisable to get checked. Can we trust you? Another big problem. Many women have become scared of childbirth. A huge number of cesarean sections have been performed without indications. This procedure has undeniably saved many children, but should only be performed when indicated. Because the research, and again, all the specialists profiled on all my releases say the same thing, that a cesarean section does not add health to the child. And the child's passage through natural ways, the child's acquaintance with this flora of the birth canal, this lactic acid stick. Mainly, this is the first contamination. It allows the child to have a better immunity, better health in the gastrointestinal tract in the future. Because with a cesarean section, the first contact we have is with the skin flora. Another big problem is many mothers start feeding their baby formula from the 2nd or 3rd month and say that they are afraid for their breast. It will sag. I understand everything, but the health of our baby depends on how long the mother breastfeeds him. According to research data and the opinion of specialists, the minimum breastfeeding duration is 6 months. From 6 months to a year, you get the maximum effect that you continue to breastfeed the baby. No mixes, no matter how they promised you that everything would be okay, that it's a complete replacement for breast milk, can never fully replace your breast milk. Never give antibiotics to a child under 2 years old without a clear medical reason. This also statistically, according to pediatricians, increases the risk of developing many diseases in a child. Indications when? It can't be any other way. Only if a profiled specialist or a good doctor prescribes them, as unfortunately, some doctors tend to prescribe antibiotics indiscriminately. Think 10 times before you give your child antibiotics. Children must get sick, and during illness, their immunity actually strengthens. Do you react to this normally? A crucial point is that there are definitely things that 100% affect the risk of a child developing autism. Undoubtedly, he is above the child who had intestinal problems, but they are amplified, especially today with gadgets. When I asked academician Namazova Baranova, a pediatrician, what should I do to make my child as developed as possible? She says nothing develops a child better than a real person communicating with him. The path to the development of a child's intellect is clear. Interact, engage with the child, and he will develop well. That's why children with whom nannies interact and play maximally, not just giving them a gadget, develop better. Interestingly, she said that what you can give to a child, in my opinion, was spoken about the first 1.5 to 2 years in the form of live communication. Then it will not be possible to compensate. And this contribution that you give will be reflected in what he will be like at 14, 18, 25 years old. There are studies that have shown that a child's cognitive at 2 years old fully correlates with what his cognitive will be at a younger school age. We already know that 2 years equates to 7 or 8 years old. So we already understand how important it is in the first stage, in the first to second year of life, to develop the child's brain. Therefore, the later a gadget appears in his life, the better. As a parent of a young child, I was advised against allowing gadgets. Currently, my child doesn't use any electronic devices. We try to invest as much as possible in him, and we wish for you to always have the capacity and strength to do the same. It's hard when you see in some cafe a child, less than a year, 6 or 7 months, sitting in a high chair, a phone in front of him, and he, like a zombie, is glued to it, not even eating. It's very important how a child sleeps. I am grateful to my wife for scheduling every hour when you need to sleep, because a child's sleep is very important. It's immunity, it's a growth hormone. When you make your child live according to a certain regimen, including getting up, no, when he wakes up, he gets up by alarm clock every morning for us. Developing this regimen is very important so that we definitely know he sleeps at the right time and gets used to it. That's why it's necessary to develop a routine for the child. This is also not lacking. There are standards, there are regulations, selected protocols that can be followed. I may post about this in my Telegram channel. Link will be under this video. Therefore, fly in, superstardom. I used to wonder how a child could crawl on the floor with dirty hands that needed cleaning. And I really had this desire. I sometimes understand the great importance of this, especially at the beginning of life, for him to have maximum contact with the most diverse flora. Understandable. He doesn't need to eat dog excrement, but there's no need to be afraid if you put a dirty finger in his mouth somewhere. It's normal. Look, what happens to many children who live in super stylish conditions? There are families who sterilize everything. Everything is boiled. Everything is clean. God forbid, the hands are sanitized. In the end, another scientifically proven fact with a bunch of confirmations, references, studies. These children have a high risk of developing diseases, including cancer. Therefore, please do not overdo it with the sterilization. It's also very important. 2 very important things that I often see. First, kids love to shake. Little ones shake, bounce, play with it. You can't do this under any circumstances. Their brains, especially when they are just born, are as soft as jelly. There is even a trauma that can lead to very serious consequences. A child can become disabled if it is shaken too hard, because they are very delicate. So please, all these rough games, shaking, playing hard, are too harsh. In early age, in the first 9 to 11 months, I do not recommend being extremely careful with the child, please. The latest, probably many different videos circulating on the internet where they say, look, our girl, sitting in a chair, paralyzed, almost not talking, was a normal child, born healthy by the Apgar scale, by which the newborn is evaluated. Everything was fine there. She was born, and what happened? Relatives came. One of the relatives had herpes, and he simply kissed the child. Herpes can damage the central nervous system. The child simply became a vegetable disabled person because someone came with it. These are the habits when 50 or 90,000 relatives come to kiss, look at the child, touch, please, especially while he does not have his own immunity. We limit our child as much as possible in the first 3 months, not closing with smileys and social networks. And probably lastly, what I came to and what is very important to me, this is how to raise a child. Probably it is pointless to say anything. The best education is to be the best example for him. Maximize every opportunity. To be a happy father. Show him the example of a loving father, a loving husband. I remember myself, everything that I have in life, my hard work, my discipline. I actually saw it in my parents, and I just repeated it. That's why I don't smoke. That's why I don't use any banned substances. Because my parents gave me very good examples, and I'm very grateful to them. And so, when my son was born, I became even better as I see it. Because I realized that now I bear responsibility not only for myself, but also for my son and his future. I would very much like that you, if you plan to become a father, or already a father, or conversely, you have a lot of experience, share the useful things that really came to you through years of fatherhood. I will read with great pleasure. People without children will read with pleasure as it offers invaluable experience. If you have something to say, go to the comments under this video and share, please, with us.